I think most people, if you ask them to define Spanglish, they have no idea what it is. I think what most people tend to mean is that it's written in both English idioms and Spanish idioms. Spanglish, of course, is something else altogether. Technically, is something else altogether. When I think about what the language of this book, like what defines it, it's something very specific, which is code switching. In this book, that there's an enormous amount of code switching. The narrator switches from Spanish, various forms of Spanish, various forms of English, various forms of what we would call technical speech, whether it's the academic speech of literary grad students or the technical language of fans, baseball fans. But the engine of this book is in Spanglish. The engine of this book is something that Spanglish resembles, which is, or that Spanglish participates in, which is code switching. That I can see, Spanglish is not a stable language, that I can see. That most of what people call Spanglish is just, a temporary moment in a speaker's control of English and control of Spanish. Someone like me, of course, who's, pretty fluent in Spanish. I mean, I'm not perfectly fluent, but I think I'm pretty damn good. And, pretty fluent in English. It's less about the fact that I don't have either language or I mix them up. It's just that I'm, I can speak English or I can speak Spanish, or if I want, I will happily code switch. But I think the idea of Spanglish is one that's very political. It's often very emotionally, charged. There's this remarkable amount of emotionalism and nationalism involved in questions of language. For me, it's the standard American idiom. As a writer, you can participate in the myth of linguistic purity. Many writers do, where they think the language is an absolutely pure event and that it is like mythically pristine. Or you can take another approach, which is the approach which I hear everywhere I go in Paris and everywhere I go in New York and everywhere I go in the Caribbean, which is the approach that the world is present on almost every street. Almost everywhere you go, what you're forced to deal with is not a single language, but a multiplicity of language. And that's, I think, my attempt to address what I think is the condition of a person in the world. It's not, again, that they live in a vast sea of monolinguists, but they are adrift, with 1,000 tongues. And that's normal.